Okay, panel number 2, empowering regions through circular solutions. Essentially what we're going to do here is we're going to build upon the great work of James Irving's panel, so standing on the shoulders of giants, and we're going to take it from 5 petajoules through to 12 petajoules. So we saw the level of complexity around identifying piles of organics, whether they be in an existing local government waste management catchment or a wastewater treatment catchment, or if it's a regional producer of organics or byproduct organics. We've got a lot of disparate resources around the country. So to go around and try and identify a solution for each one of those piles and push it into a higher order use is going to be very challenging. So that's, remind yourself, that's from 0 to 5 petajoules. Now what we have to do on this panel is talk about 5 to 12. So we're talking about another tranche of gas for any use case. So I'm talking about biogas. It could be for biomethane, it could be for behind the meter, it could be for whatever, that we need to incentivise to an even higher degree. So that's the scale of the challenge presented. So that's what we need to work on. But fear not, I have a stellar panel to support me through this session. Keep in mind, in the previous session, we touched, I think, Jared, you raised that unsubsidised biomethane. It's fantastic. I think AstraZeneca have one of the first examples in the UK. They've just gone full bore into the market and said, look, we need to secure this resource because we want to hedge our future energy for producing pharmaceuticals. So this is very high value, high end stuff. The team on this panel, plus also First Renewables, managed to stand up the first uncentivised biomethane project in this part of the world. So that's just absolutely outstanding. But anyway, without further ado, we will get into some basic introductions. So first, our first panellist is Stephen Troughton, who leads the development of Nova Energy's commercial capabilities and emerging renewable energies. With extensive experience across bioenergy, electricity, gas, LPG and solar, Stephen plays a key role in shaping Nova's contribution to the gas transition while aligning with broader sustainability goals. He brings a strategic, people-focused approach to the energy innovation underpinned by expertise in business transformation, stakeholder engagement and market development. What I'll do is I'll just briefly introduce the panellists and then they also have a slide that they will be presenting to. Sorry, I should have advanced the slide deck there. We also will have Jack Bella. So he is the Senior Energy Engineer at Fonterra, with over 19 years at Fonterra across all roles in energy, process management and site leadership. Jack brings deep experience in industrial energy systems and decarbonisation strategy. Based in Taranaki, he plays a key role in driving energy efficiency and transitioning large-scale dairy operations towards lower emission solutions. Critical insights for New Zealand's bioenergy future. Then speaking after him, we will have Andy Bedford, fresh from taking out the Wasteman's Industry Excellence Award and now an official WBA hero as part of the EcoGas team. We've got Andy Bedford to talk to the key business case levers and also operational realities that you just touched on no more than 2 minutes ago. After him, we will then have Ben Smith to talk to the game-changing CO2 offtake at the Reparar project, and a very important pillar of that revenue stack. We're pleased to welcome Ben Smith to the panel. Ben is the General Manager of Covered Crops at TNG Fresh, bringing over 2 decades of leadership in New Zealand's horticulture and agribusiness sectors, with deep expertise in sustainable agriculture and commercial growing operations. Ben's insights into integrated food systems and resource efficiency bring a valuable perspective to the future of circular bioeconomy and opportunities in New Zealand. And then last but not least, we have Parul Sood to talk to Council's leadership in curbside organics, really leading the charge in this part of the world outside of Europe. And we're delighted to welcome Parul to the panel. She is the Deputy Director of Resilience and Infrastructure at Auckland Council and former General Manager of Waste Solutions, where she led strategic policy and delivery of waste services for New Zealand's largest city. With over 2 decades of public sector leadership and a national role as Chair of Wastemans, Parul brings deep expertise in waste minimisation. infrastructure planning and circular economy strategy. Key drivers for unlocking biogas's potential across Aotearoa. So I think our first, we do have scope we'll run through, but each of our panellists is just going to run through a brief scope slide, and then we're going to have a sit-down panel Q&A after that. So I'd like to introduce Stephen to come up to the stage.
Kia ora. Simple slide, but quite effective, I think. Thank you. As you can see, by 2040, we don't have any gas for the industrial market as it stands. And this is based on MBIE's forecast of production, which we subscribe to at this point in time, but noting that there could be variabilities pushing gas forward or back. But as it stands, we have pressure right now on price for industrial market. But by 2035, we'll have real problems in managing to supply that market. And that's, we're talking about 30 PJs of gas here. So getting up to 12 is going to be really important. And if you think about that 30 PJ, there's a huge amount of our primary industry involved with that. So it's imperative that we solve this problem. So my role, I've been with Nova 26 years and primarily looking after industrial customers. And for the past 2 years, I've been looking at ways to actually help our customers with the gas transition. We've been doing this quietly, and I must thank the company for allowing me the ability to sort of walk away from working on the business to actually look at what we can do in the future. And that led us to having chats with EcoGas and supporting them through the commercialisation of that right at the end. So we did a very small part of getting this gas to market, but we're very pleased and privileged to have done that. So I'm looking at things from biogas and waste fibres from the industry, from the forest industry to help that industrial market. And yes, I'm looking forward to discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Next, we have Jack. Please join us on the stage. Yeah, there we are.
Cool. Thank you very much. So Jack Bella, so work for Fonterra, have done for almost 20 years. Stacey gave me my first job in 2005. Thank you, Stacey. So I had my first conversation about biogas like within the first couple of years. Stephen's here too. So Ben gave the analogy of the garage band practicing the punk rock band, so I feel kind of like one of the first groupies, I think, with my black jeans and my unwashed T-shirt, which was pretty much how I dressed in 2005. So yeah, I've done a few things in Fonterra since, but currently engineer in the energy and climate team. So our team manages energy for Fonterra, so we do on-site efficiencies, procurement, and now decarbonisation. So obviously decarbonisation is a fairly important part. Big job. So Fonterra, 12 PJs a year, including the cogens that we run with Stephen. That was 5% of the market. These days it's 10%, and if Stephen's graph comes true, then it'll be a quarter of the market in 10 years. So transitioning all of that gas is a pretty big deal, pretty complicated. And security of supply, really important for us. So else better to have that cool slide with a cow and a tractor, so you can't turn a cow off, and so you can't turn the milk supply off. So we absolutely have to have gas every single day. Also answered the question before about our customers, so Nestle, Mondelez, also Meiji, huge international customers, consumer-facing brands, really want us to decarbonise, and that sort of all manifests in our commitment to the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So we've committed publicly to reduce our emissions by 50.4% by 2030. So that's not very far away when you consider it takes 2 or 3 years to do anything. In all honesty, our 12 PJs won't be there, so that will reduce by 40% in the next 12 to 18 months, and probably a little bit more by 2030. But across all of our sites, we've got 26 sites, and we have 60 gas appliances, all the way from 1 megawatt up to 50 megawatts, 700 megawatts in total. That's a huge transition, and so having a drop-in fuel that we can just swap out at the gate, if you like, particularly further on in the transition, that will be a very useful asset. And obviously, as an organics processor, we have some waste that can be the front end of a AD plant. So, cool. I'm looking forward to the panel.
Okay, next we have Andy. Thanks.
So I guess what I'm going to try and talk about now is more of the operational level on how these business cases work. And there's a few points to cover off on. So first of all, we need long-term contracts. The National Party did us a bit of a disservice in January when they walked back the requirement for councils to separate their curbside organics. Because even though they're not large volumes, you can get long-term contracts from councils. There's not many industrial commercial partners out there that have signed a waste agreement for much longer than 3 years. That's a really hard thing to build a business case off when a plant costs $60+ million to build. So though having an underpin volume of 25 to 30% of your capacity on a long contract really allows you to make the business case work. Feedstock volumes, the other one as well, is making sure where you're finding that feedstock from is going to be consistent. There's definitely some seasonality out there, and it's how you ride through those sort of peaks and troughs to make sure that you keep producing biogas and renewable natural gas. Some of the offtakes I'm going to talk about shortly, but positioning a plant is something that's really key as well. One of the key questions I get is, why Reparoa? Now, it was always going to go there before we actually saw the RFP from Auckland Council. It was just going to be a lot smaller. And the reason it was going to go there is that, as First Renewables will attest to, a couple of paces off the back fence, there's now a pipeline that goes into a low-pressure distribution network. We've got flat farmland. Digestate, which I'll touch on shortly, is kind of, and I call it the Jesus nut, but the nut on top of the helicopter blades, is kind of the Jesus nut of the entire operation, and really will swing your business case in your favour or quickly away from it if you don't manage that correctly. So access to farmland. And then it's also gate fees. It's really educating clients that the business model is 80% at the gate, 20% on the offtake, and it's not the other way around. You'd be surprised the amount of calls I get from potential customers ringing up saying, hey, we've got 1,000 tonne of onions, we'll give them to you. I'm like, not how it works. There's a price on that before we take it, but people we haven't educated them. There's not enough awareness around how the model works. So Elsbetta made the point earlier around where the IP sits for AD, and AD is worldwide. It's not the process of anaerobic digestion. As Elsbetta termed it, it's everything outside the building. So it is your feedstock management. How are you balancing that organic loading, your nitrogen versus your phosphorus loading, your liquid versus solid? And as much as we have the great ability to separate packaging from organics, that packaging then has to go to landfill. So, how am I charging that the gate fee on that product that is a high percentage in packaging? It's your biogas conditioning, which I've just talked about in the previous, so I don't think I'll talk much more about that. But I mentioned Digestate. So when you produce 250,000 litres a day of a product every single day of the year, you need to have a really solid plan with how to manage that. And this is probably where Elsbetta and I may differ a little bit, because at the moment it goes in a tractor like you saw in the video, and that has 26,000 tonnes in the back of it, and it's triple bar spread onto land. Now that's enough for 2.5 hectares. I've got to get 10 of those out the door every single day just to keep up with our production. They weigh 50 tonne. So if there's any farmers or people that grew up on farms in this room, in winter, farmers aren't keen for big, heavy machinery to be driving around their paddocks. So how do I find alternatives? Can I put it into an effluent pond at a dairy farm and they can spread it through their irrigators? Can we look at putting it through a centre pivot? Again, we're going to atomise some of our nitrogen, so we're not going to get the same benefits from the product, but what are some other mechanisms to market for Digestate? And I think that's one of the key problems on how to make this work. If we put our plant in Auckland, we'd put 15 trucks a day on the road to get Digestate out. The other problem with Digestate as well is you have generational farmers. So try and change a farmer's mind on something that dad did, granddad did, great-great-granddad did. At the moment, they'll ring balance on a Wednesday, they'll have a truck there on Thursday, the farm's done on Friday. When each tractor does 2.5 hectares, if I get a 250 hectare order, that's 100 tractor movements, that's not that simple. And the further you are transporting that liquid Digestate from your plant, the more expensive it gets. When you get to 20 k's from plant, it's priced better to go with a synthetic over a bioorganic fertiliser. So they're the realities of some of the operational issues here. But you can't do anaerobic digestion without great partners. And we've got a couple of good partners on stage and some more to come. And I think, with the likes of First Renewables and others that are in the room, we can't do this on our own. I keep using the saying, stick to your knitting. For us, we just want to focus on feedstock management, AD, and Digestate management. Let's get the likes of the First Renewables and others that will do gas upgrading. Nova to do the retailing of the gas. I think without partners, we would, and Turners and Growers, sorry, Ben, I'll give you a bit of a shout out. They've been an amazing strategic partner for EcoGas with, leasing land and the CO2 and heat loops that we have with them. But without partnerships, this would never have happened. So that's something, in the future, you've got to look at how can you partner. Is it with the likes of Fonterra, because they can provide feedstock in and they could take either a raw biogas direct or an upgraded into a distribution loop. So they're just some of the things to think about, and I'm sure we'll dive into a bit more. So cheers.
Fantastic. Next we have Parul. Can you please join us?
Kia ora koutou. I just want to start with giving out a few shout-outs. One shout-out is for all the council staff that are absolutely amazing, that do wonderful things in the waste teams and come up with really amazing waste plans for their communities. So thank you so much for what you do. The other shout-out is actually for the Aucklanders in the room, especially if you use the food scraps when well done. But there are some here that I know that need a little bit of a nudge. So come on, guys, you can do better. So to that question of whether all of us are using it, clearly not. And we definitely can do better in Auckland. In terms of our discussion now, I just wanted to take us a little bit on a bit of a journey to cover a few points in terms of why did Auckland go this way? Then look at who did we partner with and why, and what were the challenges while we did this. So I guess, did we do this for biogas and biomethane? Probably not. I think we had Nathan and Hamish talk about the waste management and minimization plan that all of us need to have. So councils had a zero waste goal for the last, I don't know how many years. I think we were formed in 2010. We've always had a plan that said we have a zero waste goal, which meant we need to think about getting the 100,000 tons of organics that's sitting in the curbside residential bins. How do we do that? So that was the driver where we said we need to think about what might be the solution for this opportunity that we've got. And then it went into, okay, so do we do regular composting? What is it that the market can provide? So we were quite open to looking at what is there in the market that might help us with this opportunity. It was also to see whether we had a plant that we could feel, touch, see. Councils are risk averse. Till the time we can't see something, we're like, oh, don't know if that can happen. But I think we had good leadership when we did the procurement to actually go with an organization that did not have a plant that was standing anywhere in the world. But what we saw with that organization was that they were superstars. And it's not because they actually won an award, but they were so committed to the cause, very similar to us. the vision was the same. We need to get organics out of landfill. And what is the technology that'll get us there? And the people behind that had done so much work that they could show us around the world, this is how it can be done. So then we had the challenge of trusting that process, working alongside them to come up with what that plant might look like in New Zealand. The technology being new for New Zealand, that's always a challenge. It did take us longer, but I think it was worth the wait. It was worth walking along our partner to actually go, how do we do this? And how do we do it well? We do not want it to fail. And I guess we may have, been a little bit pedantic about the size of some things. It can't smell, it can't do this. The roller doors have to be really fast, et cetera, but I think it did pay off in terms of building that extra bits in it to make sure it worked. Challenges because it was the largest service rollout for us. In Auckland, we've done recycling, but we've done it in bits and bobs. We never did one for almost 500,000 properties in one go. So you had to kind of think through the bin design, how would you actually get it in the different parts, the different urban parts? How does the feedstock then come into the plant? So you have to think through a lot of things. And if you don't have a good partner doing that with you, there is a bit of a problem. Challenges still remain in getting residents to be part of the service. But again, I think you do more than just run the plant. I think EcoGas comes along with us, showcases what it does to a whole lot of people, to our politicians, to our residents, to school kids, you name it, and they're there to actually talk about the story. And that is what you need to make it a success. So I'll leave it there and look forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Ben, yeah, thanks, Ben.
G'day, Ben Smith from T&G, General Manager of Growing, which is a jumped up way of saying I'm a tomato grower. This is in the greenhouse next to, it's sort of in the background of some of the photos that you were seeing earlier. And my first involvement with this place, it was 2016. If you just pan a little bit further in that shot, there's a blue weatherboard house. That's where I used to live. And this plant is now out what was my living room window. So been there from the start. What's our involvement? Why are we interested in biogas? And more specifically, the other things there, because there's actually three pipes going between everyone, with four things in them. And the first pipe is the CO2 that we've been hearing about. And in the between the AD plant and us, the pipe underground, it is then ending up here. That's an inflatable plastic tube with little holes through it that we are literally pumping CO2 into the greenhouse for. Why are we doing that? Because of that equation there. Light plus water plus CO2 in a plant gives you more photosynthesis, more tomatoes. And that's worth about 20 or 30% of our total revenue, as in really, really important to us. So currently we are, if you take natural gas as the fuel, from the top equation, you burn a fuel, you get CO2 out the side of it. We take that CO2, we put it in the glass house. You take the heat that comes with that too, because you need that to grow tomatoes in Reparoa. Yes, it's the translation of that, I think, is long swamp, which is apt for the area because it can be a little bit chilly there. We are looking for cool nights. That's a good place to grow, but you need some heat to make that work as well. The coldest I've ever had there was -9, so that's a cold day to be growing stuff. So that's the first pipe. We've got CO2 coming from EcoGas, taking out that top equation of combustion. Got heat going through the rails in the middle there. They double as heating and transport, so when you're harvesting, you can push your cart up and down, and we've got scissor platforms that work up there. And the last pipe between us is the biomethane, which can handle either natural gas or biomethane, depending on about, I think, well, if we go forward a slide, how do we do that?
Sorry. Yep.
How much energy? A square metre of glasshouse needs about a gigajoule a year. Yeah, there's 100% variance amongst that if you compare 4 growers sort of thing, but, that'd be an average. And about, I think 2/3 of that albedo is coming from the heat and the CO2 directly, and then there's this other piece on top, biomethane, that needs to be there. And when that's not there, then natural gas also comes through that same pipe. So from our point of view, we've got a very resilient solution that can handle anything that changes in production. Yes, some pretty pictures there of some of the team doing some work. Is there one more slide of mine, or is that it? Oh, just some of the other energy saving stuff going on. Thermal screens, I think it's worth mentioning. As an industry, the first thing about first part of any energy project is to use less. So that's 29% saving by installing those screens across the top of the crop. You can see the picture on the left has got sort of that translucent look to it on the top left, and it's more clear bottom right. That's got the screen across it on the top left. It's made of a woven recycled plastic bottle from Denmark, I think. So it's a good thing that lets a lot of light through, because you need light to grow tomatoes, but keeps the heat in more as well. So yeah, and over the last year, that's its performance 29%. So that's my start.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you very much, Ben. So there we have a panel of a project in regional New Zealand. We have to listen to what the messages that are coming to us. So this project has near on valorised every step it could on the value chain to get it across the line. So this is what you have to do on a regional project in the face of no direct support mechanism for the energy or for the waste management services. It really is an outlier in that regard. And because of that, it means the challenge is that much harder than looking at that first 5 petajoules. But I do have some specific questions to go through with the panelists, just to sort of elucidate a bit more of the detail, and then maybe we can go to some key takeaways at the end from our discussion, and also from the discussion earlier, which we're essentially building upon, because it is all related. So first question for Stephen. Driving demand for biomethane is highly important in the absence of any government feed-in tariffs or tax credits. How do you see the voluntary NZEC market developing for biomethane in New Zealand? Will we see any residential renewable gas products, such as those offered by Fortis BC in Canada, where a residential customer can actually voluntarily purchase biomethane? Obviously, there's some questions around the long-term viability of that approach. Or could we see large retailers jumping on board, such as Waitrose, Aldi, Marks and Spencer's in the UK, which have actually facilitated their logistics chains around using renewable fuels, namely biomethane?
Thank you. So, cool. I guess, the New Zealand energy certificates are actually up and running in New Zealand. We, last month, transferred over to Turns and Grows the first parcel, which was gratefully received from Turns and Grows. They were emailing me virtually every day, where are my certificates? I had to make sure they were right. And so they're up and running. But aside from, Turns and Grows were boots and all right from the start, and had faith that those certificates would come through. But the rest of the market, there was a point where there was no LCA, there were no certificates in sight, and the market just wasn't jumping and saying, hey, we're in. They couldn't go back, end users couldn't go to the board and say, we want to buy this gas, because they couldn't actually say, how much will it offset, which is reasonable. And that's pretty much where Nova jumped in. We said, look, I woke up 4 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't sleep, and I thought, what problem can I solve? And I was thinking about eco-gas, and I thought, hey, look, the end users, the residential customers, they don't need the certificates. They would just like to see the green gas. They're putting out the rubbish, separating out the waste in Auckland. We could have Greg Grover out there saying hello, picking up the rubbish, or eco-gas could be picking up the rubbish, and then a couple of months later, the gas comes back. Comes back to them in gas. And so, from my perspective, we didn't need that, so we could jump in and have faith that, again, that the certificates would turn up in the future, and then we'd be able to on-sell them to customers. The industrial market definitely needs the certificates, and there's a lot of interest in that. And so, that's up and running. It's great. In terms of selling to the residential market, certificates for them, I don't think they need certificates. I think in terms of the product, we're looking at that option. So we're selling pretty much half the gas at the moment to turners and growers, and the rest is actually just going to Nova. And we've got pretty much until the end of September to actually work out where we're going to put that gas. And we have opportunities. We have lots of industrial customers knocking on our door after that gas. And of course, we have the residential market that are probably completely unaware of the fact that we're purchasing this gas. I'd like to think that it would go to the residential market. I think that is some reward, and it will actually stimulate more people to actually, help the councils out. And in terms of Waitrose, that kind of model, would we see like a warehouse selling this particular product? I don't think so, definitely not in the early stages. We don't have the penetration, gas doesn't have the penetration at a household level like it does in the UK. And so there probably isn't much opportunity for, or much value for somebody like a warehouse, or, I don't know, a supermarket or whatever, getting involved. However, as energy kicks on, and maybe these markets or these particular businesses get involved with selling electricity, then they might jump on board with that as well.
No, Stephen, that's great input. And I just might like to draw a parallel to that. I think we had on the previous slide from Michael, that power of the consumer in Australia, obviously with the MasterChef sponsorship of renewable gas, that obviously kicked off a lot of debates on both sides, people who hate gas, people who love gas, everything in between. But the fact that that discourse was happening was step one. No one likes to talk about electrons or molecules in their day-to-day parlance. So the fact that that stimulated quite a hot debate in Australia potentially could be that first step in New Zealand to actually drive that value chain, or multiple inputs on the value chain, because we know Auckland is providing the waste, but here they can actually engage in a purchase of a voluntary product that then gets us onto the market. With greater volumes and then more confidence for other off-takers. So, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. But I think from my perspective, on the residential level, I'd like to think that, consumers got a certain percentage out of right. So that it just said, hey, look, everybody's entitled to this energy. And then other consumers can pay more for the rest, Yeah,
no, totally. Sorry. Ben?
In terms of the circular story, those tomatoes and that collection and this gas, it ties that together, though.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, I had another question. Next question for Jack. Sorry, I'm on my wrong page. Let me get to the right place. Here we go. So there's been a few industry studies, obviously looking at the potential of biomethane in New Zealand, and obviously we know that we're an agricultural-based society, and obviously dairy products are a big part of our export in. And so a lot of people sort of join the dots between, okay, well, we know we make lots of milk, that's great. We're looking to diversify our gas mix. We know we can make biogas or biomethane from manures. Has there been any work that Fonterra have been doing at a high level to see if they can sort of leverage those existing relationships and just presence at the farm gate to see if there's any way of sort of aggregating that material. Obviously, it's going to be at a severe cost penalty. We heard that the emissions impact from Illinois, the emissions impact from trucking the waste is maybe not as significant as we first thought, but obviously the cost impact of shipping largely water-based manure will certainly be a significant driver. But as we see in Denmark, pretty much their whole, 40% of their grid now is biomethane, and that is substantially manure-based with some co-digestion happening on the side. So, sorry to keep talking at you, Jack, but I think it's critical for our situation in New Zealand. Like, can Fonterra sort of point to some direction?
Have we looked at manure-based biogas and logistics? Yes, but only at a very, very high level. I guess it's a great challenge. We're sitting here and I just said we want biogas, and now you're telling me that we've got the feedstock. So feels a bit embarrassing to say not on the manure side, but just a couple of facts there, and maybe I'll go to sort of other opportunities. So one important point, this may seem subtle, but it is kind of important. So our shareholders own Fonterra, not the other way around, and so they tell us what to do, and we don't sort of get to tell people what to do on farm. And so that is actually a surprising barrier to aggregating stuff. That they're 11,000 business owners. Manure-wise, I'm already imagining when we talk about picking up manure with a dairy truck, the food safety people coming at me with a sharp object. So there's kind of barriers there. But the reality is that we put 45-ton trucks up to and onto farm every single day, to every farm. So the infrastructure is there to bring the largest trucks you're allowed on New Zealand roads to the milking sheds. So absolutely, there's an opportunity there. Probably just pivot away from that, maybe just to give a different answer. So on dairy sites that we do own and we do operate, we have concentrated organic waste streams. So DAF sludge is one that's a pretty classic example. So high in fat, and Andy's talked about the high yield and had the biggest bar on the graph. So that stuff we have looked at in more detail. No projects yet, otherwise we'd be here talking about 2 projects in New Zealand, but would love to be back at this conference in 5 years with a project. Offtake agreements greater than 3 years was kind of talked about as a barrier. Would really, really love to sign a 10-year offtake agreement to buy biogas for 10 years and give away DAF sludge for the same period. Coal, gas, electricity, almost all the contracts we deal with of that order. So it's not something we're allergic to. It's kind of business as usual for us. So yeah. Yeah,
so it's fantastic to hear that Fonterra laying the foundations in the background, so to speak. We've got roads paved. We just need the right financial and contract terms to make it work. That's the trajectory that we're on.
Yes, that's the short answer, I guess. Probably 2 comments on that. One, I won't labour, but with subsidies come up a lot, it does sort of feel a bit sad that with that tiny little bar and that, there's no sort of support for this industry to get going. But then maybe the gas price will come up to meet the business case, seeing as we don't have much anymore.
That's a very valid concern, yes. Thanks, Jack. Fantastic. We'll move on to the next question. So this is for Parul. So Auckland City is a leader in curbside food organics collection and diversion from landfill. The first in New Zealand and among the first global cities outside of Europe. Putting recent MFE policy changes aside, and obviously we don't want to dwell on those, what do you think is the best way to replicate this success outside of the main centres in the regional context, leveraging some of your leadership?
Just setting the record straight, we were late to get this in our city. We actually have other parts of New Zealand that actually had a curbside collection. So well done to those that got it in. Although we were the ones that helped with the biogas plant or anaerobic digestion in the country. In terms of what we need to do from here, I guess it is a real challenge when the mandated policy changes on you. And also, let's not forget, it changed on not just curbside residential, because what the plan was to actually look at retail as well. So it was to see how do we get organics out of landfill as a whole city, as a whole town. So it was not just stopping at us. So I guess now we need to think about which minister do we make friends with. Simon Watts is my pick for the day today. I think we do need to have a conversation with him because he seems to be on the right track. And then making sure that the ministries are talking. I think Conrad was here, if he's still here. I'm hoping that, the conversations are happening. And just the desire to actually say councils are sometimes constrained by what the central government is telling us. And yes, it's an option for us to go there or not to go there, but sometimes you just have to tell us to go there because it's the best thing to do. So I think just keeping that in the background is really important. In the meanwhile, while that happens, hopefully, we do have the opportunity with the private sector to actually think about what other material can we get out and how can we show them the benefit in doing that. So if Fonterra is looking to do it, who else wants to look at doing it? Because let's not forget, curbside residential is a small quantum of the total amount of organics going into landfill. And if it was for councils, can we think of a different way of doing contracts as well? And I'm sure we are already thinking about this. If I just reflect on Auckland's what we never thought we wanted to build a plant and run it. That is not how we put it out to market. We wanted to look at a partner that would set up a plant. We would just have a gate fee. We would help with having a long-term contract that supports them. The other desire there was to actually enable that plant to pull organics out of the rest of the country if possible. So it's just enabling your partners to do more while you are supporting them with whatever you can in that context.
That's great. Great clarity. Thanks, Pearl. Okay, next question for Ben Smith. In your role at TNG. As the New Zealand biomethane market develops, the availability of biogenic CO2 in both gaseous and liquid forms will increase. And also, you alluded to the very important detail about heat recovery as well. So there's also that behind-the-meter heat resource, which is widely leveraged in New Zealand, but also globally. Do you think, is there a case for TNG to look to replicate this at some of the other production sites, and then maybe even in a global context as well, obviously through your ownership?
Yeah. Just take a step out first and have a look at the CO2 market in New Zealand. Cast back, I don't know, was it 5 years ago? There were two liquid CO2 suppliers. One was Marsden Point, the other was Kapuni. Now there are none. And we were paying for liquid CO2 there, I think, around $300 a tonne at one point. And if you take the same, if you take natural gas currently at call it $20 a gigajoule, it's a bit more than that at the moment by the time you add on all the bits. And each one of those gigajoules has got 57 odd kilos of CO2 in it. You know, you're talking about $350 odd a tonne for CO2. The current CO2 sources, you know, if you're buying it out of Malaysia or Singapore or wherever it's going on, I'm not in the market for that at the $2,000 or whatever it is currently. I don't know what the price is today to get it imported because I'm not buying at that level. Having said that, biogenic CO2 and in fact CO2 in general from a grower's point of view, extremely valuable resource. You heard me say before, it's 20-30% of our revenue is attributable to CO2 enrichment in greenhouses. So, you know, that gives you a sense of how important it is to our business to have. And any future energy solution we come up with has to have CO2 answered. So, yes is the very direct answer to your question. In the end, we like the idea.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Ben. And finally, Andy, how do you see eco-gas's role in the industry developing once AD facilities are established on both North and South Islands and with the regional focus?
Yeah, probably a couple of points. So I think I spoke about it before after the site tour about Gemina and Ecogas learning or paying the same school fees in the gas conditioning space. And I think there's a massive opportunity for collaboration. And I think we all try and do everything ourselves. And so I think whether it be industrial partners that want to do it on their own, whether it be Ecogas or other players into the AD space, we need to collaborate, because why learn the same lessons and pay the same money? I think, you know, another AD player into the market is only going to benefit Ecogas. That might sound a bit strange, but no one's building a plant for what we built it for 3 years ago. So their gate fee is going to be higher than ours, which puts the value of the gate fees up. So that's only going to help our business. But we should be collaborating with others. And I think there needs to be work together to grow this space. I think in the regional context, it's a really interesting one. We've quite a lot of inquiry from regional councils or district councils around in-region facilities. And a lot of the RFP or the tender documents reflect that will only go with you if you can build a facility in region. And you really need to understand the business case before we make statements like that. An anaerobic digestion plant without gas upgrading, for it to be commercially viable, because in New Zealand we don't have subsidies, you need to have a minimum annualised feedstock of 50,000 tonne, right? And you need to have partnerships like Turners and Growers and an industrial biogas direct offtake to make that work. 50,000 tonne is a lot of feedstock. Like, good luck finding a big single source contract. And then if you're going to gas condition, the bare minimum is 75,000 tonne. So the regions probably need to take a bit of a step back when they're making certain requests around the realities of having an in-region facility. That's not to say we're not looking at other areas. There's 4 plants at the moment that we're doing some really detailed business cases on. All of them are in region. So they're out of the key, the main centres. And we are very close to building Christchurch, as I mentioned earlier, going through the final stages of resource consenting. But I think you just need to have a look at the realities of transport emissions, which, as we found out, are a lot lower than what some people expect. And then look at the benefits of AD versus other forms of organic disposal.
Fantastic. Yeah, sorry, Pearl.
Yes. Can I just add to that? I mean, I guess why councils want it in region is because you get criticized heavily. We get it all the time. Why are you sending your organics all the way to Reparoa? And you can answer it like you turn blue in the face, but people still ask the question. So when you do that, be ready to answer the question many, many times.
Sorry, and one other final point around, we're talking manures and effluents towards Fonterra. There's roughly 3 million tonnes of organic waste going in New Zealand every year. The Ecogas plant speaks for 0.75% of that waste. So before we go to pre-digested feedstock streams, which a manure and effluent is, let's go and target the curbside organics, the big industrials that are ground spreading. Let's go and target the ones that are sending it to landfill. And everyone here would think it's an easy conversion. There's a company we're talking to at the moment that currently sends their organics to landfill at approximately $200 a tonne. We've nearly halved that price and they won't come across to us. There's no contract holding them there. But there is one of the terms earlier, and I can't remember who said it, it's a little bit mafioso in the waste game. You have a couple of massive offshore-owned businesses in New Zealand that play games to keep contracts. And I'm not saying I'm not having a go at them. That's just the landscape that we're in. But if someone's not moving when I can save them 50% on significant volumes, we're not talking $10,000 or $20,000 a year. We're talking, over $1 million a year in waste costs, and they won't come across to a more sustainable and cheaper solution.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There's a certain amount of structural inertia. Just how things are now after many decades of waste management services being structured to deal with a problem that was very relevant it maybe needs to change. So we're talking about structural reform here, but I also think what we're talking about is instead of going around and trying to identify what, because we're talking about many disparate wastes distributed all over the country of different natures. You're not going to solve each economic case for each of those piles independently. So this trying to push it, which is the main focus if you're dealing with these waste stocks on a day-to-day basis in the local government setting, that's going to be how can we make this fit operational budget? How can we get inside the next rate rise? And that's all understood. But for this to work and how it's been working overseas is you need that pull to get the energy out and to get the co-products out the other end. And then you watch your organics market basically transform itself. And so you've got people paying good money for chicken manure in the UK because now it's a resource. It's not just put to land. It's making lots of gas. And various other markets throughout Europe where you'll have agricultural waste that were essentially a nuisance are now being paid. And then obviously the things that already had a residual value are priced even higher. So, sorry? Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. The app. I don't have the app. Did someone else have the phone?
Still any question on 4 minutes?
Okay, let's go. TNG. At night, tomatoes don't absorb CO2, which would be wasted since it all vents into the air. Is this correct?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
But if anyone wants CO2, I've got a night offtake, so come and see me at the bar.
Fantastic. Okay, Parole. Auckland Council uses a lot of gas. Has buying biogas rather than natural gas ever been considered?
Short answer is no again, but it is something that we would look at.
Okay. Tonova, if significant reserves of natural gas were found, would there continue to be a commitment from gas companies to aggressively pursue biogas?
You're taking too long.
No comment.
Absolutely.
I can answer after you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's about sustainability. That's part of the plan.
The cat's out of the bag. Like, if you look at those slides that I had up there earlier, I should have probably articulated it a bit more, but the reason why you're seeing these prices trend up towards $100 a gigajoule on a full stack revenue basis is because biomethane has sufficiently differentiated itself. So the energy value was that little slither down the bottom of so that's natural gas. Biomethane is something else when it's turned into a product that's actually useful and can actually perform many solutions and get the collaborations going that we've just been talking about. So I think even in a less supply constrained environment for gas, we certainly will see the wholesale gas price go down. But I think the cat's out of the bag in terms of climate risk related reporting, everything else, all the other international things that are going to be happening. Our domestic price is going to be going down. We might even, if we found a massive reserve, we might even equalise with the states. I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but you'll just see a corresponding increase into the certificate price or the tax credit or whatever it is to actually deliver those services, which are differentiated at that point. Yeah. So sorry for jumping. Passion. Next question. What's the technological challenge with AD that hasn't been overcome yet? I think this is to anyone. Yeah, Andy?
I think the technology is fine. I think for us, our mix of feedstock creates a few issues. So all of our process inside the reception hall is mechanical. Food acid loves to eat everything. We have 6 mil thick outfeed screws, steel outfeed screws that after 18 months are 1 mil thick now. We have concrete that is disappearing at a rate of knots because food acid eats it. I think actually it's probably getting your balance of feedstock in because we have a lot of downtime on parts of plant because there's steel that gets put in a food scraps bin, or there's overalls that get hidden inside a larger biodegradable bag, or commercial rolls of Glad wrap, All of this seems pretty minor, but on a mechanical trommel that smashes pedals to pieces, that wraps up and takes 2 days to fix. So that's probably where it sits for us, maybe screening equipment.
Can I just, do not underestimate the challenges with people participation. That is a really big one for councils. I mean, if you look at cities that do it well, 55% tops, I think is the number. So that is something you need to be really mindful of in terms of how do you keep people doing it. Because it's not that it's gone away. It's not that it's in your compost bin. It's not in the incinerator. It is still in your rubbish bin. So just making sure that you can keep them doing it, because there is this thing about yet another thing to do.
Excellent. Okay, next question. Try and quick fire these off. I don't know how we're doing for time. Have we? 1 minute. Okay. Well, okay. I'll choose the best. I'll choose the best of what we've got here. So sorry for everyone else. Here's a good one. No, I thought that was good. Sorry.
That was rubbish.
Okay, does Gene Tech offer any promise of further optimization of the AD process or other facets of the process? I almost think that maybe an Al's better question.
That is absolutely an Al's better question. She's the brains of the operation.
Yeah. No comment. Okay, I'll pick the other one, the earlier one. Okay. Is urban sprawl into rural areas considered a risk for AD plants like Reparoa into the future? Or just rephrase that, just population dynamics and into the future? So...
I think there's always going to be an element of risk with where you put site AD plants. There's some hesitation to them because they deal with organic waste and there's odour management issues. None of them are insurmountable. Odour controls are put in place and managed carefully, but I think definitely careful consideration to siting plants, yes.
In the fresh produce industry, we call this reverse sensitivity, where you've been growing veggies in one place for many, many years, and then you carve it up for lifestyle blocks, and someone comes along and complains that there's a vegetable operation next door. So it's a well-established problem, Andy. Welcome to our world. Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap up, it's been a fantastic discussion. Security of supply, we had that in the first, we're on a declination rate now in New Zealand, and that's mildly serious. We need gas-fired power generation, industrial offtake. Long-term waste contracts, that's key. Andy made that very clear. The revenue split for an AD site in New Zealand, 80% gate, 20% offtake. We need to flip that. So if you look at all those North American and the European examples, that's flipped, and sometimes even less for the gate in terms of the stack. Digestate management options, the Jesus nut. Can we go to balance? Can we go to balance or agri-nutrients and say, look, do you want to add this into your portfolio? Can you use your expertise?
Yeah, we actually have that coming up down south, but it's still a liquid product that you're going to have to truck somewhere. So the further you get away from plant, the harder it is. I don't think it's a simple solution.
Okay. Collaboration. So all of these is going to be collaboration. That was key. And doing what you can now to lay the foundations and clear the way for a circular economy once it's supported. So I think that was pretty clear from Parul. And Andy and pretty much everyone, just don't get in the way. Just make sure you've got the bases loaded for when you get that domestic price signal, or if we can make some kind of international system work where we can get the energy and the waste services valued in an offshore market. Any final comments from the panel?
I'd just like to say, a couple of years ago, PowerCo held a conference about ecosystems. So not just about collaboration, but ecosystems. And I think that's what we need to get to grow more energy in the market, whether it be bioenergy or, from wood fibres, etc. But yeah, Nova's doing its part in terms of we're just being the last little bit of the link to get that gas to market, and also providing backup gas for when the plant needs maintenance, etc. But we're doing our role, and I think everybody has to recognise what their role is and be efficient.
Excellent.
I think, count me as an eco-gas fanboy, but I'm actually also a fanboy of our gas company, now, which I never thought I would say 5 or 10 years ago. This has been one of those projects that I'm not sure it would be true if everyone who hadn't participated, I mean, the various companies, actually really, really wanted to make it happen. And so that's Auckland Council, Lika Gas, Nova, cheers, guys. Claris, how's Peter?
Okay, thank you.